ECIC, your export risk partner.
Because the South African economy itself has been on a period of decline, this is impacting the capability and the growth of the export industry. Whilst the rand is weakened, and one would expect from that should have a spin-off in terms of increase in exports. But what is clear is Africa is the main market for the growth of South African exports. And that market has become much more competitive with other global players entering that space. So various interventions, counter-cyclical interventions, are needed to help South African companies grow beyond the narrowing space within the South African economy and find new markets. And I think part of the overall government strategy through the DTI is to emphasize value-added exports and how we can assist South African companies to break into new markets. So that's the role that ECIC in fact plays by offering political and commercial risk insurance to help, to crowd in finances who can fund these exports. Because what is key when South African companies put bids, international bids for contracts, they have to compete on the quality of the products that they're offering, but also the cost of the financing package that is attached to that offering. Because most of the buyers are not just looking for the product, they're also looking for access to competitive finance on a long-term basis to help them put together projects, whether it's infrastructure or mining projects or energy projects, which then are driving, the crowding in of exports. I think for ECIC, the way we become a player in this whole space is that as a policy consideration, we impose a requirement that where we are supporting a transaction, 50% of the goods needs to be sourced, goods and services need to be sourced from South Africa. In that way, we're able then to crowd in South African contractors to participate in a number of key transactions that are taking place on the continent. But overall, the climate remains very competitive.
Let's talk about some of the ways that local exports are being promoted globally and the role that ECIC plays in that.
I think there are various trade missions which DTI would undertake to different countries, which is key in that in order to do business, there needs to be good relations at country-to-country level. So the support and buy-in by DTI to back those exports or exporters as they seek to penetrate into new markets is very important. But obviously the business-to-business meetings do take place through these missions, and that's the idea then is to find new markets and see areas where there's synergies between what the South Africans can offer and the opportunities and needs of the other recipient countries. As I've said, on our side, we have a proactive business development team that seeks to connect potential buyers with South African sellers. And this whole exercise is guided by some research work in terms of trade and investment opportunities that we then research. We sort of identify key countries we see as potential growth markets, whether in East Africa or West Africa, and then try to drill in and find where the trade and investment opportunities lie and seek to share that information with the rest of the South African market. And then the follow-up work then takes place by way of seeking to match those opportunities with the capacity that we have, where we can crowd in both the exporters and the financiers to participate and chase the opportunities.
Earlier you mentioned some policies and strategies that you've taken on to create a conducive environment for exporters. You mentioned one policy of the 50% of products being locally produced or manufactured. What are some of those other strategies or policies that you've worked on which have helped growth for local exporters?
I think at a continental level, our Minister of Trade and Industry has been in the forefront of the discussion to create a free trade environment on a continental-wide basis. So that has been key. The second element, there's a strategy which recognizes that the future growth of the South African economy is well integrated with the overall growth of the African continent. For instance, in terms of our own content policy, we do not only emphasize 50% content coming out of South Africa, but we also allow 20% content from other African countries. So what is key here is the overall industrialization of the continent. So these countries are potential trade partners for South African companies. So their growth is also key in the long term to help as a new market for South African exports.
ECIC, your export risk partner.